Colleagues, so let's start our roundtables about the relevance of the modernity as viewed by business. So this title has a subtitle. We well mostly talk about the experience foreign architects here in Russia, and for this output is in demand here, where pros and cons of foreign practices if compared with Russian practices, and what does the city gain from this, because the architectural services consumer is mostly the city and urban communities. So I think that the participants are very interesting persons, the speakers and roundtable participants, because none of them represents a single group. So they are not pure Russian architects or foreign architects. They are not just sheer customers. So before I would uh, make an introduction, I would like to represent all the participants of the roundtable, those who are here and who will join us later. Artem Kuznetsov, he is head of the director of board of managers of board developers. He is a developer and he participates on creative processes very often, such as Krasny Oktyabr project. It's a very long project, and it is a success story, and where a lot of Russian and foreign architects participated in the concept design. And Pirogova Spa, it is a multinational project which is located in the vicinity of Moscow, and we are very often visited and show our interesting practice of foreign architects in Russia. So Edna Porter, he's the partner of the Bureau McAslan Plus Partners. Uh, I'd say that this is the architect who had, in terms of the struggling for projects, he just had a lot of difficulties in his life. This is the factory, the Stanislavski factory, and this is a very successful story. And just a good example of cooperation with a powerful and advanced developer, and this is also a good practice of a very careful restoration, reconstruction of the existing buildings, and as a result, we received one of the first public spaces in Moscow, and those, surprising and fantastic backyards. I think that architects thought about them from the very beginning, but we didn't expect them to turn up. So Olga Alexakova is the partner of the Bureau Moscow, and currently well, an expert in architecture won't understand if it is a Russian or of an overseas bureau, but Olga has a unique experience. She worked a lot in the OMO bureau. She was a partner to it, and one of the most important actors. She was one of the most important actors of OMO projects in Moscow, and really she. It was one of the most successful Moscow bureaus, which combines the foreign experience with Russian practice. Well, so foreign technologies are extensively used there, including software and computer technologies. So Evgeny Murinets, he is. He represents the architectural authority here, in a way, and he's the deputy head of the architectural council department, and he worked a lot in the speech bureau, participated in a project, City in the Forest. It was a huge project related with residential areas, where a complicated scheme included a lot of water sites. and everything was implemented in terms of a consumer, of a resident. So this is quite a new type of housing, new typology. There was a very interesting work with facades, with public spaces, with parking lots. So it was very interesting projects, and it was very successful both in terms of finances and architecture. So Mr. Leontiev. Denis Leontiev, so head of the design bureau Strelka. So it is this bureau is an innovative agency which promotes advanced foreign experience here, and he works tied up to Russian partners and Russian consumers, and he also worked a lot in the field, and also in foreign countries. He worked for Cocker and Blau, and now he uses the skills to organize large competitions and important competitions on the global scale. So I would like to build today's discussion in a free way. Let's share opinions. Let's frankly discuss what happened in our practice. I hope that we will also quite honestly discuss such issues as contracts and cost of different works and projects, because I think it is the first round table devoted to such topics, with the participation of the unique audience and with the unique speakers. So let's start not from the top, but from the bottom. So it would be good to know from Olga and Denise so about their perception of these bureaus from inside. Where is the difference of work in a foreign bureau and in the Russian bureau? Maybe we will share your observations. Olga, you're welcome. So, UMA is a unique place with continuous experimenting. There are a lot of young employees, and the experience is the main driver of the overall process. And so I just came there from Delft, and I was educated in Delft, and the education there is all based on the same principles: to do more interesting things, and not to follow trivial pathways. These trivial pathways, conventional pathways, should be studied through and through. So on this, just constant movement forward, that was we brought with us to Russian Bureau, and try to support this by all means. So how about the projects which were designated for Russia? What was the attitude to them? So where did they come from? Was there a special, attitude to them, or a special management scheme? So how were they perceived from inside? So first, it was a project of the reconstruction of the chief headquarters in St. Petersburg, and there was vision special on other large projects. So, but Rem has a special attitude to Russia. He used to say this. But it was just a normal project in a row of other large projects where I've been with them for 5 years already at that time. So when you worked with the structure of the project, so what did you start with? And did you start with a search of partners in Russia, or with some learning lessons from some other bureaus, or looking for some additional information? At that stage, it was a competition of the World Bank, and we participated in it without Russian partners. So the Russian Bureau was awarded the contract, and this project has been implemented so far. So, but we didn't work with Russian partners at that time, so we didn't suggest that you would do that. So we just it was at the stage of the concept, and everything was done on the table. And the other project with the also just didn't went beyond the concept. So these two concepts which were developed has been, elaborated. So the concept of the first block, the первый квартал, so was not elaborated further on. But the other project was, just elaborated in some part. So why? What do you think? So the first project was not elaborated due to the political situation because it was too radical politically for the moment, and the company and in St. Petersburg, as a company, was awarded the contract as a result of the bid. So we expected Denis Kapralov from Cross. Maybe we'll have him here later on. So Denis, what are your impressions? Good afternoon, everybody. Well, the first impressions, based on the following factors, kind of a factory of thinking. So this technology of the process, so it is tied up to the powerful elaboration of an idea. So in Russian offices, people are just sit in their office thinking, and when something occurred to their mind. But in foreign companies, so everything is based on high tech and creativity. So the office where I worked was large. There were more than 100 people, or even up to 200 people who worked there. There are no just people who would not be a specialist, and a huge portfolio is available in the office each month. So when people have been selected on the basis of their very interesting backgrounds, well, specialists and high professionals, that is those whom I work with. So this is the second very important component. There are no weak experts. There are young people, but they are not weak. So we're all experienced people who worked with them for 20 years or even more. There are two key stories. Well, talking about the bureau, so they work in different countries and well, inside different cultures. So whereas the specifics of work in a multicultural context, so these are just determined by the city, by the client, or it is just, or they have a very flexible approach. I guess, talking about Holland, it always used to be an expert-focused country, and I think so the work outside of the borders of the country, I think is a tradition for it. So in Austria, it's a little bit the other way around, and they mostly built abroad. Historically, some offices work more in the domestic market, the other work in the outside market, and it is a global structure, and it depends on economic cycles, and it's easier for them to adapt to different situations. And if, for instance, they have a failing project in America, then they switch over to Asia. So I think that it's mostly conditioned by economics. It's become specific for a lot of large offices in Europe and in the United States. It's a normal situation. There is nothing special about that. And maybe it started since the 1980s, when there was one of the first waves in Japan, waves of just economic depression with the emergence of the economic bubble in Japan, and so it was one of the first global waves of architects who started to move around the world. And so, to some extent, such bureaus are leaders in the architectural world, and they try to seek their own market. Somebody would find themselves in China, in Japan, or Brazil. So what do you think about that, Olga? Yes, they find themselves everywhere at all these points because life of an architect has become similar to a salesman, sales representative. So, well, my colleague told me that he lives in a plane. So, some architects say that we won't come to China and we won't work there, but then as a result, they find themselves in China by the end of the day. And so Jean Valley office, for instance, is absolutely against work in China, but at any rate, we saw them in China. Okay. What is the feeling of architects towards Russia? I mean, bureau leaders. So RAM has a special opinion, I know that, but as regards market issues, the adaptation, so all countries have their own adaptation problems. So when in Portugal, concert hall was built, we also just encountered a lot of issues. So each country has its own specifics. So what are the peculiarities here in Russia which attract foreigners' attention, or what was of special attention of your company when it entered this market? So this company, well, does not pay attention to local specifics. Well, the projects were developed without my participation, by the way, but we communicate a lot with companies that work in the local market and have been here for a long time. KCP, and certainly, well, first of all, a challenge is complex contracts, lack of payback, and a lack of good partners. So because foreign architects are either invited here if they are, just great architects and they work together with local architects, or great architect's name is used and the other company actually implements a project under somebody's name, and people who live on Plotkin's house think that Ramco has built it. But this is a legal, environment, and the lack of the transparent contract terms and conditions. And the other option is when a foreign architect is invited by the developers because just on average, Western office is better than Russian office, any kind of Russian office. This is actually a problem because Russia doesn't have many professional architects and architects just at large. So that's another topic that should be discussed individually. But how about this feeling? I would like to sum up what was said by Olga and Denise. I think that there are some uniform standards for which are implemented by each bureau. They concern everything and the standards, and it's I think it's a kind of a good machinery where everyone understands its place and its job, and at the same time it is a creative process, and as a result we come up with a good output. So it would be good to understand what a Russian customer expects from a Russian architect when he invites him or her art home. So your experience is unique in a sense, and so the work with Krasny Oktябрь has been done during, say, 10 years. Yes, about that, yeah. So when you started inviting architects, were almost forced, Eric Vinegret. So why did you decide to invite foreign architects to switch over to them? What was your idea? Just to is the basis of that, and what was the criterion for picking up an architect? I think these architects were very, very different, and was also very interesting to understand your relations with Russian or local architects. If we get back to the issue, why?
For example, you could ask, how are Armenians better than Georgians? Or are we not discussing that? Russians against Western architects? That's why we are asking you this question. Okay, this is an incorrect message. I disagree with Olga drastically. You cannot compare some abstract Western architectural bureau and an average Russian one, an average one against an average one. There are a lot of terrible Western architectural bureaus that cannot do anything, and a lot of talented Russian architects. This is not where the problem lies. The problem is elsewhere. If you have a synergy between the architect and the developer, if these two people understand each other, understand what they want, then you get a good project. And in addition to that, of course, you need good professional builders, general contractors. We build some facilities abroad. We are in the green field there. You can select anyone. And the problems that we face there dealing with Western architectural bureaus are so big that we don't even have them here in Russia. Sometimes you can have a very simple process and people don't want to correct simplest mistakes, and they say, we either do this way. Give us an example. For example, I'm not going to mention individual cases maybe, but we have to adjust it after them using our own efforts. If you don't have a good developer, no matter what you design, you will never implement this project correctly, even if you are a genius. For example, we spoke with Jean Nouvel a lot. We explained something to him, what we wanted for the Red October, but this project was unacceptable. And we lost time, we lost money, and a bad impression. But if we moved the same project elsewhere, it would be very good. Foster, another example. Again, here we explained everything correctly, but the facade he just could not get the Moscow facades well enough. Residential facades, 20 options, 20 variants. Genius in terms of planning. Everything is great, everything is functional, but no facades. And what shall we do? Everyone is looking at it and says, this is London, pure London. This is not Moscow. And Russians sometimes do feel that. So when you select an architect, you have to understand whether this person has any experience working in the country. If he doesn't, at least he needs to be able to adapt, to dive into this environment and understand clearly this place is for this. And after this person understands that, you may start asking him to draw something. Before that, it will all go to the basket. This is my brief response to all this discussion. Okay. What kind of mistakes are they making? You mentioned the facades. He wouldn't get the facades right. What else? What other risks do you think they might bring in? There's only one risk, as I said. The more advanced developer is, for example, suppose we have a unique Russian developer and his office should speak English. That's number one. Number two, he should have people who not only studied in Russia but had some Western educational experience. If we have this kind of developer, then he can use any designer or architect. There will a good terms of reference, good tender or competition, good selection of an architect, and then it will go smoothly. But of course, in practice, this rarely happens, and you get a lot of mistakes. But from the Western architects, they are far away. It's difficult to speak on the phone. We have to travel. They don't open offices here. If they do, they hire the same Russian architects who are even less professional than those who work in high-quality Russian bureaus, and that's you end up communicating with them. For Foster, have you visited Foster? Yes, of course. They have this good factory. They have a great factory. Well, they have 500 people there. They have all these brainstorming sessions. They always improve something. This is a factory. We don't have offices like that. But so what? But their facades just are not good for Russia. You think those facades are not good? Why? Because they won't need to spend more time here or have an office here, study the place. Facades, it's almost like a joke now. Maybe they will get them right. They have a lot of people even without Foster himself, but they are far, and you get tired of it. Let's go. I will go and speak with Grigoryan. Maybe he will draw something better. Grigoryan, I guess, is a Moscow-based architect, and that's what's the foreigners are just far away. That's why they are worse than Russians. And how do you work with them? Terms of reference are important, and that's always mentioned at the urban forum. Everyone says that. Why do you blame the urbanist or the architect if first you need to formulate a task for him, this terms of reference, this technical assignment? And there is no culture, there are no people who can formulate the task right from the beginning. But besides that, do you feel that for some more efficient work with foreign architects, you need what? What other things? They need to speak Russian or what? Open an office here? They don't have to. Russians need to know English, so we need to have some adapters. In my opinion, the ideal situation is, I said, this good Russian developer, a very experienced one, with some experience in the West, with some courses, basic training courses, who did any kind of educational courses in the West. And this developer should have a design bureau that can create working documents, tender or competition documents. And if such a developer combines with anybody, then you get a good product. And when you say a Russian architect unites with the Western architect, this is nothing, leading nowhere. If, as a rule, especially if the developer is not good enough, is not professional enough, and that's bad. If this is a united team, maybe that might work. But if we have two companies, one company says this and another says that, do we have any examples of such good developers, such design bureaus at your company? Our number of architects is adequate to the number of projects. We are finishing 2 large facilities. Now we have, what, about 20 designers of different levels. What are their functions today? They need to finish the project after the architect, do something that the architects cannot do. So any architects, Russian or foreign ones, do some conceptual work, is what you're saying, and then they make a rough drawing, and then what? We have a big residential complex with some residential functions and offices and a hospital, a wellness center, a restaurant, a multifunctional set of buildings, but not too many offices. It was drawn by architect Filipov. He is a genius, but he is more of an artist, and his abilities to work on technical drawings are limited. technical look. So we kind of adjusted the design after him until the very last day, even though it's been commissioned already. But we've been readjusting, and it's the same in the West. And then this Filipov is doing authors monitoring. But if we talk about columns or classical forms, no one can draw them better than him. But this is paper architecture, what we call. He is a paper architect. But at the same time, with foreign architects, you also think it's the same structure. They work on the concept and you finish all the technical details. We will not be repeating the mistakes of our childhood, that's for sure. Olga, what could you say? This scheme when and finishes the work. And one final point. I disagree that it's the same all over the world. Russia in the area of being lazy at work. We are specifically keen for slovenliness, or Portugal and Holland. No, I have my own opinion about that. Nevertheless, you think this is a wrong, this is the good approach when the architect does a concept and then the client or someone else finishes it with all the design and working drawings and documents. You think it's correct? Because ideally, if it's the same team that starts the project and finishes the project, because there are always problems with translation, and there is a model of working in consortium, and this model should be followed from the beginning to the end. For example, in Berlin in the 1990s, all the offices sat together and worked in small teams. Now in Holland, the crisis is going on, and now big companies form consortiums, and when people speak the same language, this model is quite viable. On the other hand, and I disagree with you, there are not too many offices in Russia that could work in this 50-50 model or team that with full mutual understanding. If you say how we build it, then we need a consortium. If we're talking about talking, then you can do it any way you want. And here we have a certain misunderstanding, deep misunderstanding, and that influences the quality of architecture and all sorts of other solutions. And I think somehow it is reflected in the final result and in the residence. And here I would be interested to understand the position that Moscow Committee for Architecture has. In the last 2 years, we feel that we have many more foreign architects of high quality. In the past, this was initiated by individual developers, particular companies I mentioned, and in some cases it worked, and in some cases it didn't. And for example, this well-known story related to copyright issues, to how the concept is then completely changed in the final stage. But now we have this new tendency, and perhaps Eugenia could comment on that. Do you think this general line, and if it is true, then why now we focus on foreign architects? Thank you. First of all, let me tell you let me join the dialogue that just took place a couple of minutes ago about the participation of foreigners and how many of them and what kind of status they should have for the project. We had an experience of design work with different architectural bureaus from abroad, and our experience has shown that if foreigners are subcontractors for a general contractor, this is the most optimal and clear way of working and managing, especially if we consider that the general designer knows how to plan engineering connections and so on. We should not have difficulties when adapting the project. As for the projects, or the architects rather, that work for a developer, here we have two sides to it. One side is that it's always good when architects work for the developers. They can always control the documents that they are provided by all parties. But another thing that can happen, a drawback here, what might happen if such trend continued? We don't have Dennis with us, but we understand quite well how crossed a company works and how they have to finish their projects. If a developing company adapts the architectural concepts of all these foreign architects and changes them, usually, for example, they make a couple of residential buildings and they do this concept with foreigners, and then they develop the rest of the residential quarter themselves. They take the same architectural tools, they get the same color schemes, and it's like a repetition of the first set of buildings. And but at least in this case, they know the cost of this work of these foreigners and the timelines. But on the other hand, this is turned into a series, into a typical project. But these companies might have large plots of land, and they may have some interesting projects there. But for example, yesterday we discussed yet another project, and they use the same ways again and again. They worked with foreigners once before, and now they just keep copying these tools and these methods and techniques for other projects. In terms of authors' work, it's not very well. In terms of getting a product for the city, it's not very well. And crossed a company, when they are building all these panel-based residential buildings, but we may end up like in the Soviet Union when we had that series PM44T, and then it will be like that for the rest of the city. And this is the situation when the client took the initiative, gave this pattern to some other architects, and they began copying it. And this is what happened in practice. Now, back to your specific question. We don't have any rigid policy that, for example, we have to use foreigners. No, we have an understanding that foreigners, when they work in our market, they also improve our Russian bureaus. We create this international level competition in Russia, and for us, this topic is linked with the improvement of architectural projects themselves, and also foreigners get more interested in us, not only professionals, but also investors, foreign developers. We also increase this overall interest to Moscow and to Moscow sites. That's why we don't have a special project like that, only foreigners, but we support that. We get delegations from major international bureaus. We have an extensive database of contacts, and for example, when we want to attract people for open contests, we send out this information and for an open competition, and if they want, they participate in that. And in this sense, yes, we are quite open for dialogue, and we do support that. But I cannot say that we specifically give orders to foreigners. We don't have that, and this would not be correct. The work should be done with Russian companies and foreigners through honest competition should participate in projects through tenders or competitions. That's my overall opinion.
I also heard another viewpoint like this. So Russian architects learned how to design certain types of residential houses or offices. But when there is something special, for instance, some interesting land plot development of some stadiums or public gardens and parks, then in this case, maybe it's a more rational approach should be used, and the invitation of foreigners is preferable here. There are different bureaus, and some of them cannot just get a consortium with foreign architects, but to exclude Russian bureaus in this process is just absolutely wrong, because we have our own standards and a special approval procedure typical for this country, and it includes the participation of a Russian bureau from the very beginning of the overall process and even the adjustment of the design solution. There are special, standards for each, area, and they are written in Russian, and we must follow all of them. We must stick to them. And so, if it's done by foreign companies, then they will, I think, they can fail here. So we work together with Foster at one construction site. So I participated in a bid for 2 plots in Krasny Oktyabr, in Red October. So I remember this process, and I remember all, rules and regulations and standards which were adopted for this area in October. What is the center of the project? What is a architectural landmark? How it should be interpreted by local specialists and by foreign specialists. It's a very important thing, which is related with our work together with Russian partner for a foreigner. And the agent of the designer was Mosprojekt, and it was responsible for the correct direction of the progress done by architect, and to comment on what's been done, and to finalize the project on the basis of Russian rules and regulations. I don't think that one of that we will by the end of the day come up with a certain structure elaborated for this type of work. Just to listen to different opinions. But I would like to give the floor to Eden. And we talk mostly about Russian reality. And I would like to listen to our story and actual story that happened with the Stanislavski project. I think that there is a unique opportunity to talk about the results of the project, what's been done under it. So could you please tell us about the scheme of the work, how it was built, and just apart from the concept, how you managed to survive, just under this project during a few years?
Very much. Stanislavski was our first project in Moscow. We were invited because the client had seen a building in Italy. And I think it's interesting to remember that foreign architects in Moscow is not the last 10 years, it's the last 600 years. The Kremlin is Italian. Many foreign architects, Moscow has always been an international city. This roof was a Spanish architect, an engineer. It was ever thus. It was ever thus. The only rule we have, and it was a perfect example at Stanislavski, is that we said at the beginning of the project, we must finish the project. We will not accept a commission that is only a conceptual commission. The analogy I often make with Russian clients is it's like being a parent with a client. You're not there, you're there at the beginning of a child. It's an exciting thing, but also you have to make sure that you do everything you can possibly do to make sure that the child develops and grows. And it's the same with a building. You must never leave a building. So Stanislavski was 5 years, 5.5 years, and we had to complete it through the world recession, the economic downturn. But there's no magical formula. The only way it really works is if you form a fundamental relationship with your client, and it involves a lot of travel. I see my Russian clients more than I see my English clients, and it's not rocket science, honestly. You just have to be prepared to spend as much time as they need, as the project needs, to make sure that it's complete. I'm not surprised Lord Foster struggles in Russia. I think the imposition of large ideas, large simplistic ideas on the basis of a reputation, I think very rarely work in Russia. It's a very personal business, it's a complex environment, and the only way to resolve it is to spend time to understand the city, to understand and commit absolutely to the building, but also not the building, not just the building, also the setting and relationship of the building to landscape. And I think that's a real other weakness of many foreign architects in Moscow, is that there's too much conversation about the building as a single entity, and there isn't enough understanding of really how does the building create and improve regeneration around it. And I think that's really the great achievement of Stanislavski. I don't think the buildings are exceptional buildings, they're delightful buildings, but really the space between the buildings is the fantastic accomplishment of Sergei Gurdjieff as a client, but also the commitment of a team to deliver it. I think you have to work with Russian architects. It's fundamental, and I've always found Russian architects very skillful, and as long as you can actually get the same engagement in the project, at a project level, with the Russian executive architect and the contractor, it's fun. It's a great environment in which to work. But it just takes time. And if you go back 600 years, there was no flights. So I guess the Italian architects or the German architects, they had to stay here. They had to stay here to deliver their projects. And I think really that's the bottom line. You do have to be here. It doesn't mean that you have to open an office here. It just means you have to commit to be here virtually or physically, or as many conversations as it needs, in order to make sure that the idea is not just an idea, but it becomes a real building. And the shortfall, I think, is that too many foreign architects, too many Russian clients, they understand architecture as a product. Everybody knows what a building looks like, but they don't understand architecture as a process. And architecture and design is a process. And this process of questions at more and more detail, takes time. It takes a long time to build a building. And really, the answer to all these questions is to do with time, and to make sure that there is a proper contractual arrangement at the beginning of a project that allows for enough time for a concept to mature into a real building. Thank you.
5 лет, на самом деле.
Well, 5 years, I think it's quite a normal period for such project in Moscow. Well, in terms of all issues of approvals and concept development, so especially for a foreign architect, I think it's a very successful story, and I'd like to understand about this commitment, what you said about commitment, how you personally were involved into this project year by year. So were you involved more in this work at the beginning of the project, in the middle, or in the end? So what was your role? Did you deal with the concept, or you participated, for instance, in the approval process?
Is actually business in Russia is very personal, and once a Russian client knows you and trusts you wonderfully, they never let go. So the commitment is that it's very difficult to pass the work on. It really is. The commitment I have to a client is to a building, is that I will finish the building, and that's my only rule. It means, though, that there's only so much work we can do, because there's only so many of these relationships. Again, I think it struggles, international practices struggle when the Jean Nouvel or Norman Foster, they just don't have the time. They don't have the time and the commitment, and perhaps their lieutenants don't establish the relationship, the key relationship. I mean, the episode of Foster at the Pushkin, to me, is a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. But I think it really just comes down to the fact that you have to set aside a period of time and say, we're going to finish this building. That's the thing we're going to concentrate on and not worry about anything else. And again, I think the problem in Moscow is there's almost too much development. People are too busy, you know. Clients can't actually deliver the projects they have. They don't have enough project managers with enough expertise to deliver the work they have. Everything is always yesterday. It's always too late if it's yesterday. And you know, as I said, it comes back to this thing about buildings are complicated. If it's going to be a good building, it's a complicated thing, and it just demands that people really focus, really focus on it. So again, there's nothing special. It's honestly just the commitment of a client and the commitment of an architect to deliver a building.
Но все-таки каким образом именно была ваша вовлеченность?
So how about you personally? What was your personal, you know, schedule? How it was personal schedule changing along the project?
What was your involvement in the project? You did the concept. You were participating in schematic design development. I did. Well, I have a team. I mean, I'm not Superman. I have wonderful architects who work with me, but it means that I probably have to attend and be prepared to attend most of the discussions and workshops at a fundamental level throughout the life of the project. The commitment is that I committed to Moscow, and the great thing about Moscow is it's a difficult city to kind of come to love quickly, but eventually you do come to love it because it is an inspiring city for an architect. I really think that.
А какое было у вас разделение с вашими местными?
How did you delineate functions with your local partners? What were your competence and what was their competence? Maybe you even learned something from them.
My view is that I've often found the Russian architects to be better than we are, wonderfully, you know, and I've always had a view that there's as much to learn as there is to teach, and it's not a false humility. Honestly, how can you compete with a Russian architect who really understands the system, the bureaucracy, the practicality of the details? Because of the, you know, so many foreign architects, they don't understand the impact of climate. You know, it's an incredible impact on architecture. And the whole issue of icicles, it took me 2 years to understand icicles. You know, the fact that people die because of icicles falling off buildings, and you have to be careful about how you design a building in that regard. The thermal performance of buildings, so much. There was so much to learn. And I think a good attitude is that, that there is a lot to learn, and it's helpful for the executive architect if he feels that, or she feels that, that their work is valuable, their opinion is valuable. Therefore, really, it's all about the building. You just build a team around the building, and if you get it right, everybody feels that the building is a part of them. It's not the product of the foreign architect. It's just the product of the team, and everybody wins. Honestly, it's not easy. It's not always easy to do. We've had some failures. We've just failed to find a good relationship with a client who just wanted a solution too quickly. And no client wants to pay twice for the same service. That's often the difficulty. Why should I pay a foreign architect, and then why should I pay a Russian executive architect to do the same thing? It's very difficult, and I understand that with a client. But if a client trusts you and really understands that you're committed to his building or her building, then I think there is a solution to it. I don't think you make money, frankly. It's not an environment where there's a lot of money to be made, because it takes a lot of time.
Мне кажется, здесь очень важный вопрос. Вот то, что сказал Aidan, we must finish the.
Well, I think that Aidan was absolutely right, that we must finish the buildings. That's a very good approach. So, Artem, what do you think about that? What do you start with when you choose an architect or a foreign architect? If a foreign architect starts saying that I want to complete the building at any rate, so how would you perceive this approach and this architect? How would you build your relations with such an architect? First, we start forgetting that both Russian and foreign architects have different specialties. someone well are keen on public spaces. The other was born to design and build cottages in the countryside to work at some small projects. Some others can be genius for instance, apartment planning, and which sell well. Well, the other can design offices wonderfully. So we cannot say that there are universal architects that can do everything. But and besides, there is another strata, where there are narrow specialties like civil engineering and maintenance of buildings, lighting and so on, and some 10 engineering and maintenance functions that cannot be combined in one bureau. Even faster, and his bureau had at least 5 consultants as regards, for instance, traffic and some civil engineering particular things. But anyway, it is a team. I understand that I don't have a team, though I didn't understand who were the members of this team. But I talked to Sergei not very often, and as far as I understand from these conversations, you had some 5 consultants and outsourcing architects on the team. So if an architect comes to you and says that I will do everything from the beginning to the end. So if I were the chief architect of Moscow, I said, okay, just win a bid and do it. The city, on the one hand, is a developer, and on the other hand is a leaking developer. So certainly you should trust somebody who would be responsible. So I would prefer here an architect who would be responsible for everything, and I would certainly demand the final result based on the Russian construction norms and regulations. And doesn't matter where he originates from, Russia or UK. So let's remember the Radia project. There wasn't some interlocutory solution because the underground space is really complicated and entangled. It is impossible to have just very fast projects there. So we should just look different things. So to build a cottage or to be responsible for a complex project like the Radia. So another project, Pirogova, there is a company, Pogano, a very talented, a very good company, just with talented architects. So they built already 7 or 8 buildings here, and they even renovated or reconstructed their factory with a focus on Russia. But so they do everything in Italy, so they can build the overall building, and so they disassemble it, and then again just assemble it here in Russia with furniture, with a shower, and so on. But they cannot do it so without failures. So it could be a leak somewhere or another failure. So they don't understand to the end, all the Russian specifics. So when a lot of clients start working with Russian geniuses in architecture, for instance, Tatan Kozembaev, he also implemented, 10 projects in this country, and some advanced developers say, okay, everything is wonderful, but there is no functionality in the project. So, let's choose a foreign architect, and then they will certainly encounter issues regarding leakages or some other failures with the infrastructure and so on and so forth. I think the teamwork, should first of all focus on the relations with a very good and efficient developer. So you will like it with an efficient developer, and if you work, for instance, with some, XYZ company, so your project could have failed, though you could have come here twice a week. Okay, so Artem, I should single out two key words which you mentioned. These are bids, competitions, and consortiums. So a few words about that. And maybe during the last 2 years, is a new practice which is being implemented in Moscow, and so the administration of the city is involved in it, and some new agencies like Bureau Strelka. So on the one hand, it is an opportunity to select an ideal consortium for implementing a project. On the other hand, currently, a lot of issues are being discussed regarding the participation of foreign architects as they are on foreign and Russian consortiums. Undoubtedly, we need just a very efficient designer, but where should be the differentiation, the delineation for the outputs of this work? Maybe Evgenia and Denise will comment on that, because I think that by the end of the day, the city would receive a very good and efficient object.
Are we talking about a specific project or in general? In general, okay. You can give examples, of course. Here it's a quite clear topic, scheme. It was born out of our architectural practice. The concept could be done entirely by a Western architect, and then, according to our opinion and our experience, then it should stay with the project to a certain degree throughout its implementation. For example, during the working documents style, he could develop certain sections there, of course, with some adaptation by Russian architects. At the working documents stage, this is authors monitoring, and during the construction phase also, he could be supervising it. In our opinion, a Western architect should really finish the project until the very end, until its full implementation. And this is the minimum that we demand, because usually what kind of projects we get? We get a lot of projects and concepts that were done by Western bureaus. They are relatively good, but we would reject them and switch to Russian designers, and very often, because of the cost, this designer was not the top one in terms of style and architectural quality, and of course this would be bad for a project. There were a lot of incidental details, and the facade materials would change. This was not approved by this Western original author, and we believe that at minimum this Western architect should be in the project from the beginning to the end, and his signature should be at all stages, and he should be protecting the project, defending the project at all architectural committees, together with the Russian adapter or general designer. This is our opinion. This is what we support all the time, and we keep saying that to the investor. Let me try to take a broader approach. Olga has mentioned that in Russia overall there are not enough architects. We are talking about what, 15,000-20,000 people for 120 million. In Germany they have what, if I remember correctly, they have 150,000 professionals for 60 million of population. So we don't have that many architects. We could all fit them in one stadium, a relatively small stadium, all Russian architects. And then how many of those architects are professional? That's the total number. And how many of them are real professionals? And this is a market issue. Where are those people? If we're talking about the design process, and Aiden might correct me, for example, if we correct Russian and rebar norms and their stages, 9 or 12 stages rebar has, above 12, yes. And we have what? Officially one stage, IP stage. And this British architect began to take all those 12 stages and they take certain questions at every stage. In Russia, he just draws a concept and then this EP stage, and he doesn't have any control mechanisms. The third part is about copyright or author's right, which doesn't exist here. We talk about European tradition. It's a sort of a license that is given to the developer for the exclusive implementation of a project. We don't even have this concept. It does not work as a control instrument. It might work as an instrument to get their pay and for the architect never to return, but as a supervision of contract, it doesn't work. Can global companies or foreign companies or Russian companies work in this market? We should understand how is there a connection with any international practice. And the final thought, I agree with you, Artyom. We cannot say foreigners are bad or good or Russians are bad or good. We have on my bookshelf, I have books by foreign architects and Russian architects, and I don't divide them. I can read foreign books. It's as if I could say that you can only read foreign written books in the countries where they were written. For this foreign architect to work in Russia, it's not easy, but we don't have enough architects. And given the technology, given the volume of the market, it doesn't matter whether he is foreign or Russian. Let me finally make some comments. When I spoke about average Western, average Russian, I spoke about professionalism. I didn't mean good or bad. And professionalism is linked with education. Technically, Western education is better. They get educated as engineers. They get structural education. They understand process. This is what I meant when I spoke about professionalism. Aiden says that we have to finish the building. And if we talk about the market structure, and we have certain costs for this architect's service, you understand the further you go, then the work gets more complicated. For your concept, it's one amount of money. For your working documents, it's a total different amount of money. If we're talking about 15,000 Russian architects, how many of them can prepare working documents? When we talk about branded offices or well-established offices, maybe not superstars, not marketing superstars, but we forget about that huge amount of documents, working documents that is done in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, in Turkey, and nobody knows about them. This is the kind of work that should be done here in Russia by Russian designers, or what is happening with your project, for example. Russian architects should be doing that. Then they become professionals. Otherwise, why do we need them? What can they do? They should have some professional skills. If they don't have, it's like an interpreter of Russian SNPs, Russian construction codes. He is like a mediator between the government and the professional architect. He stops being an architect. He stops he's this interpreter of SNPs of Russian. He says, page 54, and let's interpret this page. We have this unique situation. We have some geniuses from the West. They have some powerful partners like Mosprojekt. I understand very well that they make a concept, then they give it to a sort of a melting pot of a big design institute, and the end result is very different. So it's not very clear how this new generation of architects who can do this kind of work, where we can get those architects. Only if they go through all stages of design, when they design from the beginning to the end, when they work on the working documents, only through that they can learn. Otherwise it will all go wrong. Otherwise, we will have all these offices in Turkey, in Slovenia, and Poland that will work on the working documents without any ambitions, but high quality working documents. And we will have these international stars, so they will be delivering concepts, and our part will be like the mediators between the foreigners and the government until we learn how to make this final stage. And we don't have that. We have some exceptions, some rare exceptions, but overall, technological solutions, engineering solutions that could be competitive in the global market, it's hard to find those. If our architects who say today, no foreigners, we should be doing that, they are trying to compete on the ideological level. I want to have equal access to ideas with Foster. But if you compete with Foster in ideas, that's one thing. But you cannot forbid comparing the ideas. Everyone will still see this is their idea, this is your idea. They should be competitive. Before we say stop inviting foreigners here, we should build domestic technological basis and become professional with working documents and things like that. As soon as we get that, the architects will have high quality on the ideological level. And this is the work of Moscow Architectura, Moscow Architectural Committee. Is this what you're doing? Please explain what you want from me. Recently, some major architectural contests were won by foreign architects, large consortiums, and we have this complicated schemes of how it's all done, and the design documentation is going to go, and this is what we are doing together with you right now, especially when we talk about non-standard projects, Serpomolot, Zaryadye, and others. And do you think, will you have any regulatory framework documents or recommended scheme of how we should work on such projects where we involve foreign architects, a lot of different specialties? All these tenders required not only foreign architects but different specialties, landscape architects, engineering architects. My universal roadmap, we do not have a universal roadmap. What we have is a general understanding that I mentioned a few minutes ago, and the understanding of that such complicated projects are unique in terms of their this roadmap, and because there are projects where you have complicated not just engineering system, but the team should have certain permits, certain access. For example, these should be architects that cannot even go abroad. I'm not sure what you mean. Probably some military or defense-based architects, and they should be staying with the designer. And in these projects, we could use foreign architects for architectural solutions for the IR stage, but without dealing with top secret matters. Or, for example, there is new construction with revamping, and this reconstruction should be done by bureaus that specialize in that. They have specialists for that. So in this case, the roadmap should include the work of different subcontractors under one general designer, or the general designer should work on that reconstruction and the new projects. And maybe we could have foreigner in the IR section. So there's no overall roadmap because, by the way, we don't have such a long history. We didn't have that many tenders to have a solid statistical base, and those contests that we did have were, each one of them was unique. We have an implementation plan for each project. We have desires of the client. We have some works that were done and some completed works, and we cannot just say we can have an overall roadmap because it's mutated forever. So my answer is no, yes. And at the same time, Aidan, what about you? If we talk about how do foreign architects work in the UK?
It's exactly the same. There are distinct regulations and codes in the UK, and a foreign architect has to find a UK-based registered executive architect to assist them. I guess in the UK, though, it's just a much more familiar circumstance in terms of American or European architects. And there are more architects. You're absolutely right. There are just more architects who are prepared to help and are eager to help. So it's, on the whole, I would say it was much easier. I mean, the irony is it is an irony, I suppose, is that Russian architects very rarely work outside Russia. You know, they don't have that experience. The irony is that in the Soviet times, Russian architects used to work much more outside Russia, because they were building buildings in, you know, the wider republic of the Soviet Union. And I think that's interesting, because I think, you know, Russian architects need to grow, and they need to understand the kind of the internationalism of the business. You know, you buy stone in Spain, you assemble it in Germany, you buy bricks in Denmark. You know, it's a technological, economical business in terms of putting that together. I think it's important eventually for Russian architects to acquire the confidence to begin to explore working and understanding other international norms. But it's happening. It really is happening. You know, a number of my friends, Russian friends, are pursuing competitive opportunities, and there's no problem with the quality. I think, you know, they do have the quality, and I think they just shouldn't be frightened. There are opportunities there. It is easier in the UK, though. It definitely is easier, and I have to say Russia is quite a demanding environment in which to work. It isn't easy. It certainly isn't easy. And it just comes back again, you need a lot of patience, and you need a very good client relationship, and a good relationship with the city, you know. But ultimately, I think the question always comes down to quality. You know, is the building good? Is it worth doing? Unfortunately, so many of the buildings that we see around us at the moment, they're done too quickly, and actually it's not worth the effort, in my opinion.
На самом деле очень интересно, просто ровно в тот момент,
When Aidan began to talk, I wrote down this question. This was about Russian architects, surprising as it may sound. We only have just a little bit of time. I want everyone to briefly take this question. What do Russian architects need to design outside of Russia? There are unique stories about Russian architects, Soviet architects. In the past, some genius modernists were sent to Central Asia, and all of a sudden we have those fantastic, unique masterpieces of modernism in Central Asia, which are still there and feel great. I would be interested in each one of you. What should Russian architects do to actually work in the West? Artyom, how about you? I think if we talk about monumental buildings costing many billions of dollars are done by Russian architects all over the world, like nuclear power stations, industrial architecture. Are they being built? Yes, they are. These nuclear power stations, are they built by English architects in Russia? No. Why? Because they cannot. They don't know how. We build what we know how to. And there are clients in industrial architecture. If we talk about civil architecture, there are no clients. What shall be done? Let's try design something. In civil architecture, for example, here's this boss who had some Russian architect, and he had a Russian architect near Moscow for his personal building. Then that oligarch went to Spain, bought some land there, invited this Russian architect to build a small house in Spain. I start with a little cottage first, and with the office. This process is initiated by the client. The world will be more transparent for the Russians people, for the people of Russia. We want to spend our vacation time abroad, but very few people are actually ready to go and work abroad. Language barriers, cultural barriers, and if more Russians go there, then Russian architects will follow.
I think, first of all, I'd like to imagine that that sense of reconnection with Russian architecture, the glories of Russian architecture from all periods, the confidence to actually say, I am a Russian architect, and that means something. It means that, it was and is a unique style, a unique attitude towards architecture and city making. I think that confidence of identity is really important. And I think it's there, but I think actually it's a message that needs to be told to a wider public outside Russia. And I think the confidence of the Russian identity worldwide, particularly in architecture, is something that's starting to happen. But there's a journey to go yet, because perhaps there just aren't enough Russian architects of the reputation and ambition to actually make that happen. I think the last thing is that Russian architects, I think they actively do need to kind of perhaps seek more interesting ways to kind of reinforce their skill base. I think that they need to kind of examine all sorts of different opportunities to gain access to technologies and students and universities, just to kind of give them the opportunity for a wider skill base for them to compete. And it is a competitive business, and I think many Russian architects will tell you how difficult it is to find staff, literally to find design creative staff. So opportunities to forge more creative relationships with foreign universities, to offer places for younger architectural students for internships, to work in practices aligned to universities, an educational program that just gives another opportunity for the local practices to gain access to that European pool of talent and creativity. I think it's an interesting opportunity just to make sure that they can really express themselves and also fully understand the kind of the true internationalism of the market.
Мне тоже кажется, открытость миру.
As I think that the openness to the world, desire and ambitions, well, these are the key points for Russian architects to enter the international arena. So it's been already said. I would like to add that starting from what's going on, I would like to say I know a lot of people who entered the international market, the Western market, because they were invited by our competitors, first of all, to design a cottage for them, for instance, and then there were rumors around the good architect, and so he or she was invited to another client, and now they know a set of buildings, some 7 or 8 buildings in London or in France, which were designed by Russian architects, and it is very important for all architects to establish good relationships with local partners, to find a good local partner. So this, rumors plus a local company. So, for instance, in Italy, it is absolutely necessary conditions because everything is very stringent there. Because, for instance, the overall village needs to have this stucco of this grade and the window jump of this angle and so on and so forth. So this should be done by Russian architects together with Italian partners, and that's what's going on today. And I personally believe that it's good that Russian architects were in the West, but first of all, an architect should get an education. He should get education there in the West, to work a little bit in the West, and then come back here and just realize all the ambitions and all the skills here in this country, not to go abroad. Well, just a few points that I would like to single out. This situation is not unique. It was seen by Japan and China before. So first of all, the strategy of Bureau Strelka which we're trying to implement first of all. So the scheme is like this. At some stage, we need to invite professional architects to Russia and to set up certain working groups and consortiums so people get together and harmonize standards. And at the next stage, it could be kind of moving outside. It doesn't mean the architects would emigrate, but Russian companies would start sponsorships in this area, but this process is just at the very early stage. It's only on setting, and besides, there should be jobs for our architects in Europe. Okay, that's any national architecture would become an international business when a national business becomes international business. So a Russian business would train this architecture in this process. It's also related to our oil and gas business, and they should be these processes should be somehow combined, but we need harmonization and synchronization with international level in architecture. If we don't have good ideas or skills to operate in this market, you will certainly fail. And we saw a few examples, for instance, in Paris, it occurred 2 years ago, and so and we can see that the process that occurred were not synchronized and the products were not competitive. So what we do would hopefully allow us to synchronize the standards, and during maybe next 50 years, our Russian companies will be able to enter the global market. We have here at least 2 clients in this room who are built successfully in the West. Your client built in the West has become an architect, and your former boss also implemented quite a lot of projects in the West. There are out of 6, there are 2 people like this. It's 33%. Okay, it's good percentage, good rate. I think that a very interesting year is ahead of us, and we live somehow from Moscow Urban Forum until the next Moscow Urban Forum, and I think next year at the same round table we'll hear a lot of exciting things. It will be the year of harmonization, of synchronization, and a lot of models will be tested for Serpent Mollet and Zaradia and Strelk development models under these projects will be implemented, and we'll see what we'll come up with. So we must finish the buildings. That's the main principle. Thank you very much.